Patrick, extremely on the back foot here, has to protect the Calyrex, and now Grimmsnarl is able to start setting the screens. Reflect is first, facing down the Rillaboom and the Calyrex, and here comes a big Choice Specs boosted Terra Starstorm into the Rillaboom, deals about 50% damage to that Pokemon, a little bit less, as Patrick needs to reposition. A critical hit gets a little bit of extra damage onto that Terapagos, and every little bit counts when you're trying to break through these screens. Wow! A huge adjustment from Patrick, bringing out the Pelipper. And for those of you at home who are wondering why this crowd is going crazy for a Pelican, Pelipper has wide guard, which means that Terra Starstorm that Aurelian has just locked into is useless.
Hi, welcome to the channel, and welcome to another installment of our Masterclass series. This is a series of videos where I am joined by a high-level Pokemon player or players to discuss a Pokemon archetype or element of gameplay they're particularly proficient at or with. These videos should hopefully serve as an educational resource for the VGC community as a whole, for older and newer players alike. This week we are joined by Patrick Connors to talk about Pelipper. Pelipper is a staple of the metagame. It is a weather setter. It has access to lots of great tech moves such as Tailwind and Wide Guard, and has really stood the test of time across multiple regulations. Patrick won North American International Championships with Pelipper in the season just gone, and has recently cut the Puerto Rico special event also using Pelipper. So he's definitely an expert to talk to us why the bird is so good. Without any further ado, let's get into our conversation.
I am Patrick Connors. I am the NAIC 2024 Master Division Champion. I won with Pelipper with a pretty standard set at the time, which was a Protect/Wide Guard set. I also am coming off a top 4 at the San Juan special event with Pelipper, and in the last year, I have gotten over 1,000 championship points with Pelipper alone.
I mean, who else to ask about Pelipper then? But that's a serious haul. Is it the number one Pokemon, or is there something else like along with it?
I think I'm like, there's like a little range of things that are all pretty close. I know, I think Pelipper is number 2 for me, behind, I think, Calyrex, Ice Rider, then Urshifu is somewhere around Pelipper's points, and then Incineroar's behind both all 3 of those. So those 4 are typically my most commonly used Pokemon, but I am very much so a big Pelipper fan, as 2 of my most recent Day 2s and top cuts were with Pelipper.
Absolutely. So let's get into what makes Pelipper good. Some very high level notes here, but why don't you tell us what makes Pelipper great?
Yeah, of course. So Pelipper is a unusual Pokemon to be very good in the meta, and the main reason it's unusual, it has really, really low base stat total for a fully evolved Pokemon. It's somewhere around the mid 400s, but what really sets Pelipper apart is its supporting toolkit, which starts with its ability Drizzle. So Pelipper is a central component of weather teams in non-restricted formats, as well as in restricted formats, especially when you're in a single restricted format. And the only other weather setter you can reasonably use is Kyogre for rain, because Politoed is not very good in a restricted format. But Pelipper's ability Drizzle, being able to set the rain for 5 turns for no other cost than just having it on the field, makes it a very, very useful support tool for teams that could be weaker to Sun teams, as well as teams that have a general Fire-type weakness, such as Calyrex Ice teams and Zamazenta teams, who both of their restricteds have a natural weakness to these Fire types. So on top of countering Sun teams in a 1 Pokemon slot, it also helps support your Fire-weak Pokemon by reducing fire damage by half within the Sun. And then on top of that, something that really sets Kyogre apart from both Politoed and from Kyogre is that Pelipper has the Water Flying typing. And the Water Flying typing allows it to do something that neither Kyogre or Politoed can do kind of confidently, which is hit grass types or also be neutral to grass types, and also be able to set up rain for its fellow water types. So Pelipper is a really good Pokemon for kind of creating offensive pins as well in rain teams, on more aggressive rain teams. Because if you have a supporting like Pokemon like Basculegion or Urshifu, where their primary attacking move is going to be a water type, a very common switch into a water type attack is going to be a grass type, or any other like a dragon or another water type. Pelipper's Hurricane, which is 100% or actually cannot miss within the rain, um, is a really good coverage move as well as a stab coverage move for complementing its fellow water types that it is supporting with the rain and the rain boost on the water type moves. Another thing that really makes Pelipper very good despite having overall low base stats is the move pool. And the move pool of Pelipper is kind of perfect for what it wants to be, which is a supportive piece. Pelipper gets access to really common supporting, or at least in restricted formats, really common supporting moves such as Wide Guard, Helping Hand, and it also gets access to Tailwind in the less high power level formats. And each of these moves create valuable ways to disrupt your opponent and also create favorable board states or add a little bit more offensive pressure onto your opponent. So in the restricted formats, the most common set that you'll see on these teams are going to be something of one of the 5 move, which are Protect, Weather Ball, Wide Guard, or Helping Hand. Wide Guard's really good for the common restricteds that run spread moves, like Miraidon runs Terra Fairy Dazzling Gleam, Kyogre runs Origin Pulse Water Spout, Groudon runs Precipice Blades, which, as well as being a Sun type or a Sun setter, Pelipper double counters it because of the Wide Guard and the ability to negate Sun. And you also can entirely wall Calyrex Ice Rider with Pelipper because most Ice Riders run high horsepower and they run Glacial Lance, which alongside Wide Guard and the flying typing allows you to be immune to all of Ice Rider's moves if you're running it on the mirror. And then it also helps to handle, doesn't necessarily counter, but it helps to handle things like as well as Terapagos and CSR who have those strong spread moves. That Wide Guard really helps you protect your Pokemon and buy you even a turn. And a turn can be all you need, especially in a restricted format when you have high power level Pokemon yourself to create favorable positions. So the Wide Guard's a really valuable tool as well as a Helping Hand. When Pelipper isn't necessarily fast enough or strong enough to do enough damage, being able to get off priority Helping Hand for a partner like an Urshifu or a Calyrex Ice Rider under Trick Room, or even a CSR as it's sometimes seen on to help with the CSR some matchup. Any sort of Helping Hand boost is really good, especially when it already does its job with getting rid of the Sun or creating a reduced fire type damage for its partners. And then I already touched on this. Its flexibility is really, really great. In this format alone, despite it having a somewhat standardized move set, at Worlds, we saw people like Shiliang Tang run a Goggle set. I ran a Cloak set and the Puerto Rican special event with a Terra Grass. And NAIC, I ran a Focus Sash, max offense, max speed Pelipper with Terra Ghost to ignore Fake Out, as well as other priority moves such as E-Speed or other normal moves generally, like single target Terra Starstorm from Terapagos. So a lot of these traits make an otherwise very underwhelming Pokemon a very, very good niche supporting pick and a very, very defining aspect of rain teams that are not running your restricted as your rain setter.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant, and yeah, it really explains in depth what makes. It's like, yeah, I think a lot of newer players might look at a 450 BST bird and be like, why do people use it? And like, it's there's a lot more than you can see on the surface. It really is. Yeah, it's a staple of the metagame. I think it's not going to go away. It's not going to be necessarily ever like in the top 5 or 6 in usage, but it's never going to go away.
Yeah, I think it's always top 20 though. It's always kind of a bit of a stain on the metagame. It's always there to annoy the Sun players and keep them from winning every event.
Well, Koraidon's popular at the moment, so I think
it is.
Let's have a look at some of the results. Pelipper's been, since it got Drizzle, it's been good, but like just having a look at the Scarlet Violet era, it's got a lot of results. Obviously, your international win. It's got multiple regional wins. It's got another internet second. It's got another internet win. Um, like you can see it on all sorts of like different comps. Like you can see it on like dedicated rain teams, like Felicampos. You can see it on like more balanced type teams like your own. Yeah, it just really highlights how flexible it is and like how much of a sort of ever present piece it has been throughout the entire life cycle of the games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a really interesting thing about Pelipper as well is even though it's on all these very different teams, a lot of what I already touched upon kind of still stands true with how it supports its teammates. Like, if I remember right, the Justin Tang team uses a Hurricane Salamence as well as the Delibird to have Pelipper support them with their offenses, as well as it reduces the damage that the Amoonguss or the Goldango would take from fire type moves. So it contributes both offensively and defensively to pretty much every one of these comps. And if you look at a lot of these teams, another good example is the Santiago winners team. Without Pelipper, you have 3 separate Pokemon that are weak to fire attacks. So it really, really kind of opens up the ability to run a bit of redundancy in your type weaknesses because you're able to set a board condition that allows you to better take hits that you wouldn't otherwise take. And if you look at even like that number one Chile team, there's no real rain abuser, but just that defensive support alone is enough to kind of warrant it on that team, as well as countering the Sun teams that would probably be problematic otherwise. So it's really interesting how Pokemon that's kind of known as like a rain setter and something that set like supports rain abusers that you see on something like Fede or Victor's more traditional rain teams is still very valuable even outside of the context of a very traditional rain team with very traditional rain abusers.
For sure. Like you see, I remember that Utah's was even a Life Orb Pelipper at Worlds, which is
Yes, absolutely.
shows a real variety in like items as well, which is mad thing. Like you would assume it just has to have the sash because of the bulk, but like there are ways to circumvent that. And, like,
absolutely.
So now we're going to talk about how we pilot Pelipper. So this is obviously it is frail, and it is usually very valuable. So how do you take care of your Pelipper, and how do you position it?
So Pelipper is, as we described, really frail, but it's not entirely frail. So Pelipper's highest base stat is its defense stat, actually. So it can be a really, really decent defensive tool against more physically oriented teams if you're running like the bulkier safety goggles or covert cloak set, or even on Utah's team that was Life Orb, he still ran max HP and some defenses to kind of promote that longevity. But Pelipper can be bulkier than you'd otherwise assume because of its really high natural defense. But on top of that, Pelipper's typing is really, really good. It has 1 immunity in ground typing. It has the resistance to water and fighting, which is really good in an Urshifu dominant metagame. And the only prevalent weaknesses it has is electric and rock. If I remember right, I think those are the only 2 weaknesses of water flying typing. So as long as you kind of protect it from the special attacks, which a lot of the most prevalent special attackers in the metagame aren't necessarily things you'll bring Pelipper into. You might bring it into like a Chi-Yu set to reduce the Chi-Yu's sun or fire moves, but it isn't necessarily usually there to wall out the special attackers. But even against a lot of special attackers like Calyrex Shadow Rider, you still have the option of wide guard or other things like I think some senior in Vancouver actually won with Pelipper Ice Rider this last weekend, and I know they ran a Terra Dark set to also wall out the Calyrex Shadow Rider with wide guard if they're a psychic. An Astral Broad set, if you have Terra Dark, you actually can't touch Pelipper in a very similar vein to how Calyrex Ice Rider can't touch Pelipper whenever it starts setting up wide guard because Glacial Lance is negated, and then it's naturally immune to high horsepower. So if you kind of know how to position or be like aware of Pelipper's weaknesses, but also its greatest strengths, it's surprisingly got really good longevity. I mean, it is a really good defensive backbone, But there's multiple ways to kind of use that defense or the supportive capabilities to its best uses. So depending on the type of team you play or depending on the type of player you play, Pelipper is going to have to be used in different ways. So for instance, if you're facing a more slow or defensive team, there's a very good chance that you can just lead Pelipper plus a Rain Abuser, like an Urshifu or a Basculegion, or even an Archaludon, to overwhelm your opponent with water type attacks, as well as the weather balls and the hurricanes are going to be coming off of the Pelipper's respectable. I think it is 95 special attack. And with the rain boost, the weather ball is hitting for 150 base power, plus the weather ball boost. I think it ends up being basically like a hyper beam, like a stab hyper beam off of the Pelipper, which, despite it having pretty low special attack, all of the base power multipliers, making it, I think, 225 base power after stab, after weather boost, after weather ball's base power, make it a really, really strong move despite having kind of mediocre special attack.
Absolutely.
And then Hurricane's also a stab 110 natural base power flying type move. So if you know how to kind of leverage the coverage to support your rain abusers, like an Archaludon hitting Electro Shot, again, a grass type resist electric, but you can cover that with a Hurricane, or a water type hitting a grass type you can cover with Hurricane. Knowing how to complement your rain abusers with Pelipper's attacks, or just to double down on the water type attacks with Weather Ball, can really, really open up and kind of break holes into very defensive teams. And then against the more, I guess, balancy teams that you may bring Kyogre into, like the Calyrex Shadow Rider or the Terapagos, or even the Ice Rider, a really good way to use Pelipper is to either bring it in with a pivot Pokemon, like a Incineroar Rillaboom or a Scarf Urshifu, which is commonly seen alongside Pelipper, or on Fede's team, a Flip Turn Basculegion. Just different ways to pivot and get it in safely, knowing that it isn't a very bulky Pokemon, to be able to hit its support moves like Tailwind and Reg H or Wide Guard and Reg G is a really, really good way to utilize it. And on top of that, if you're going against the Sun team, sometimes the best way to win a Weather War is just to be patient with your Weather Setter in the back and not just lead it off the jump. So a very good way to use Pelipper against teams where you're afraid of the fire types on the team, like the Sun abusing teams or even the Chi-Yu teams, is to switch in Pelipper to lessen the damage or to win the Weather War. Just hard pivot into it. But the main two uses are you either use Pelipper in the lead to overwhelm defensive teams who can't otherwise answer like the onslaught of rain, and how strong rain can be whenever it's uninhibited, and then also as a very good supportive piece to kind of slowly play into a position where you can utilize the very, very specific tools that make Pelipper so good and convert that into a winning position or a good advantage.
That's brilliant. No, thank you very much for that. I'm sure people find that extremely helpful. And now we're going to move on to some just sample builds. Obviously we've discussed already quite a bit about the ways of building Pelipper, but just a couple of them here, just so we can sort of look at some example Pelippers.
Of course.
So we've got obviously this is a very, very, very traditional rain team. It's got Rain Sweeper, it's got Rain Abuser and Archaludon. This is just a sash set. Which obviously is particularly common, especially when people are trying to get more value out of its attacking moves, I believe. Like you say, I think, and then we could look at Yuta's team, which is Life Orb, which I have been swept by Life Orb Pelipper more times than I care to admit. It does, like you said, with all the multipliers, it's really impressive. And I believe this was like a really slow Pelipper as well, which allowed it to function quite well in Trick Room.
It was like an auxiliary rain abuser. And then also, it kind of enabled Yuta's Ice Rider to be Terra Grass, help against the mirror if you're facing a Moongus. If I remember right, Yuta's Calyrex Ice Rider was also like minimum speed. So this team really looks like it had a very kind of conscious way of like setting up Trick Room and then sweeping under Trick Room pretty safely with the Life Orb Pelipper and the Ice Rider, and weakening the fire moves for the Terra Grass and the natural ice weakness. So I think that's really neat.
Absolutely, and like obviously it enables the lander so you can't miss Sandstorm Storm in
Absolutely.
the rain, which is always nice. And then why don't you talk to me a bit about your NAIC team, because obviously you won and it's got Pelipper on it. It's just the it's a wide guard sash set, but obviously talk to me about this team. Was this a was it an Ice Rider Pelipper team first, or was Pelipper just like a perfect sixth mon? Did it arrive somewhere in the middle of the build? Yeah, talk about this team.
So I think whenever I started in Reg G, I had the exact 3 sets of Urshifu Water with Coaching, Surging Strikes, U-Turn, Terra Water, Ice Rider, and then Pelipper, Sash Pelipper with this exact moveset from day 1 of Reg G. And everything else kind of fell into place to best enable these 3 pieces. And the main reason why is just because Power's Ice Rider's main weaknesses are going to be fire types or Incineroar, things that want to either hit it super effectively with fire moves or burn it with Will-O-Wisp or other things like that. So Pelipper and Urshifu are really, really nice natural partners to support the Ice Rider. And on top of that, I wanted Terra Water on my Calyrex Ice Rider for the reason that I wanted Pelipper, which is a downside of having Pelipper is that you don't just boost your Urshifu, you boost your opponent's Urshifu. So I kind of had to commit to all of these like different defensive water terras. So, I also did get reverse sweeped by being greedy and bringing Pelipper whenever I couldn't kind of like leverage my defensive pieces. And then on top of that, Raging Bolt is a really good complementary piece for whenever you're facing the water types that could threaten or take advantage of your own water type moves. Same thing with Rillaboom. Helps deal with Miraidon, which would have otherwise been a really, really tough piece to tolerate with this kind of 3 electric weak 4. And then the Incineroar as well was there, I believe, to help with Shadow Rider and Zamazenta at the time whenever they were running a little bit more different sets than they run today. Because I think back then there was a lot more Iron Defense Zamazenta.
Yeah.
There was a lot less good into Incineroar. They hadn't learned how to play into Incineroar at the time. So this team was just a very standard balanced team. It used Pelipper in its very traditional roles, which is to weaken fire moves for my Pokemon that are fire weak, and also to support the Urshifu and doing as much damage as possible with the Terra Water as well to stack multipliers on the Urshifu.
Absolutely, and this is you got a distribution Pelipper out of it. You have your own Pelipper immortalized, which is really cool. And did I see you took the same Pelipper to Puerto Rico? Did you just fiddle with the set? Or?
I did not actually. I took my event Pelipper, so I took the Pelipper that the Pokemon Company distributed, but I did change the set. If you want to, you can go to my Twitter profile, and I do have the OTS of that as well there, or I could just send it to you. But basically, I went with a slower Covert Cloak Pelipper, and that Pelipper was similar to Uta's Pelipper, was designed to be more of a Trick Room supporter. Oh yeah, you can do that with the Victory Road as well. Right, it was meant to be a slower, more supportive Pelipper, and the reason that I ran Covert Cloak, it'd be 2025.
Oh yeah, of course.
You did. But it was a Covert Cloak Pelipper because Wide Guard has +3 priority, which is the exact same priority as Fake Out. And I wanted to make sure that I could always get my Fake Outs off pretty comfortably, irrespective of my speed tiers, as well as losing the Terra Ghost to kind of prevent the Fake Outs. So I did the Covert Cloak so I can guarantee that I always get Wide Guard off despite whatever speed tiers or whatever Fake Out Pokemon that I'm facing.
Absolutely. No, so like you say, even within you using one, there's a couple different sets, different builds. So it's interesting to see, and it's interesting to see you're still using Ice Rider, but how the team's developed. You've gone for the more offensive Terra on the Bolt. You've got a different grass type, and you have a Landorus over an Incineroar, which is, I think that's a pretty significant change. But obviously, Landorus is extremely powerful in the format at the moment, so it makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely, especially with how good Miraidon has become in the months after NAIC.
And then we will have a look at an early Rain team, Gavin's OCIC winning team, which is, again, it's just another Slash set, but actually it's a Terra Flying, which is cool. Boosts those Hurricanes even
And this
further.
is before Spider Ball Pelipper was.
Yeah, Hydro.
I think this before the game was released. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Gavin was playing with fire with Hydro.
It's probably why he's got Terra Flying, so he doesn't have to worry about pressing Hydro Pump very often.
Absolutely.
But
This team actually was one of the first ICs I think I watched, and I remember being really, really inspired by Gavin and this team. But this team is really, really interesting. Follows a very similar principle to my teams that I've mentioned, just how to use Pelipper the best ways possible, which is you lessen the damage for the Amoonguss with the Rain, and then you also use Palafin as your Rain abuser. And Palafin's more similar to Urshifu than it is to Archaladon or Baskia Legion, where it is a Rain abuser, but it is not necessarily dependent on Rain to get its role done. So I would argue it's like almost like a pseudo Rain abuser where it 100% benefits from Rain being up, but it doesn't need Rain to be up like the Bastion and Archaladon sometimes do, or most of the time do. So it's a really kind of flexible, balancy Rain concept that I think definitely inspired a lot of how I build.
absolutely, yeah. And if anyone watching wants to look at Rain, the archetype as a whole further, we do have a masterclass on that with Don Check, which is a really good watch. It's long, but it's really good. And yeah, he goes into depth about all the different weathers. He's a successful weather player overall. He's used a lot of different weathers, so you can have a look at that. And then I think the last one we'll look at is probably just the Reg H. This is sort of mid to late Reg H, when everyone's running Scale Shot Dragonite. This is a really cool, like, semi Trick Room team with Pelipper once again, and it's got Sinister this time, which obviously benefits from the reduced fire damage. And this is, and obviously got an Archaladon, but I wouldn't call this like a pure Rain team. This is just a really interesting sort of a bulky offense semi Trick Room team.
It's almost like Rain and Tail Room because you got the Tailwind and the Trick Room.
Yeah.
It also has Muddy Water, which is a really weird thing that I haven't seen much before or after on Pelipper. But I think it made a lot of sense for that format because back in Reg H, there was a lot of redirection with Electabuzz and Magmar. And Muddy Water allowed you to have a spread water type move that wasn't surf, it would target yourself. And it allowed you to really take advantage of how much redirection there was and kind of how much just generic support there was in that format. So I think this team was very much so a product of meta calls and meta adaptations, but again, it's got two different Pokemon that would otherwise be fire weak without the Pelipper. So Pelipper provides really good defensive support, and it also has the very traditional Rain Abuser and Archaladon, which this team definitely seems like, to me, less a Pelipper team, more of an Archaladon team. Because if I remember right, Victor would often like scale shot his Archaladon to get the stamina boost. He'd use the Sinister to heal it up with Life Dew, as well as the Hospitality, and then it would enable with the Pelipper. But even despite it being a pretty heavily Archaladon team, the fact that you're able to run overlapping weaknesses, like with those two Pokemon that are fire types, that would otherwise be very weak to fire type moves, is really nice and convenient for opening up team building.
Absolutely. And now let's just have a look at partners. So we've covered a lot of this already. So it's not a lot more to say. This is just a general sort of summary of the things you want to put with your Pelipper. So, any further comments on this, or are you really happy we've covered this so far?
I guess I haven't talked much about Landorus. I think, especially in Reg G, more so than any other format that had Landorus and Pelipper allowed, they work really, really well together. That's something I've been using, as was visible with my San Juan team. Landorus complements a lot of Pelipper's offensive and defensive weaknesses really well, and allows you to have a more like secondary rain mode that isn't traditional. So often, if you want to counter Urshifu Pelipper, you have mons like Raging Bolt or Rillaboom that can kind of disrupt and do like either fake out or big damage to either of those pieces, and just remove them really quickly. But whenever you have Landorus as an abuser, you're able to hit both Rillaboom and Raging Bolt for super effective damage with ground and poison coverage. So I think that specifically Landorus is an excellent Pelipper partner currently, and I think that it's explored, but it definitely could be explored more because I don't think many people picked up on the Landorus Pelipper core until Worlds of Reg G, where you had the Xieliang and you had the Utah teams that both run Pelipper Landorus. But I think that's been the most interesting adaptation of the archetype since Reg G Part 1. So I'm excited to see kind of how Pelipper gets used in new ways to complement and better the Landorus and the new sets and the new ways to kind of build these rain teams. But overall, I think we did cover everything pretty well.
Absolutely. And just quickly, what are your thoughts on presuming we go into double restricted? We were actually talking about this before the call. We don't know. They might throw another curveball, but if we do go into dual restricted, do you think Pelipper remains, part of the meta game, or do you think the wide guarding restricted sort of knock it out of its place in the format?
I think a lot of what makes Pelipper so good is the roll compression that I touched upon earlier. When you're allowed to run dual restricteds that have similar toolkits to Pelipper, instead of Pelipper, you can just run a Kyogre. Instead of needing a wide guard user, you can just run Zamazenta. You have way higher base stat total Pokemon that can do the same job. However, I do expect dual restricted to have a high concentration of Koraidon and Groudon teams. And despite Kyogre being able to set the rain or Zamazenta being able to click wide guard, they can't do both at the same time. So Pelipper will definitely still have a role, even more niche, I think, then than it is now. Because I think a lot of the teams that traditionally use it, like Calyrex Ice Rider or Zamazenta, will have a little bit more interesting partners that can handle the problems that it has a little bit more proactively and a little bit less reactively, like Pelipper's design. But I think that there will definitely be players that use it. I know I will probably test it in dual restricted, but I'm sure that it'll have some sort of niche, but it'll probably be a little bit more niche than it is.
Absolutely. Brilliant. That brings us to the end of our Pelipper Masterclass. Thank you so much for coming on, Patrick. It's been great. You've really highlighted how good the Mon is. Just any shout outs and socials for people to find you on, and then we can get out of here.
Yeah, of course. I am the same handle on all social media. It's always Pat PAT _con CON 5. So Pat _con 5 on all socials. If you want to reach out, if you want any advice with Pelipper further from this video, or want to ask about any of my team building decisions, my DMs are open for the most part, so I'll make sure to get to you whenever I can. And I really, really appreciate anybody who tuned into this video to listen to me yap a little bit about one of my favorite Pokemon. So, thank you for having me.
No, anytime. Thanks for coming on. And we will see you guys next time.